And looking back at Niall's life, as we've been doing constantly since he died, one glaring fact emerges. He never made an enemy out of anyone. One of his friends wrote in the letter that they feel sad for people who never got the chance to meet or know him. The ultimate result of Niall's horrific injuries was that he died a lonely death on the streets of a town he loved so much. To say we all loved him is an understatement. Simply put, he was a class act.
In October 2010, I was a uniform inspector in the Drogheda division, and my work consisted of representing court cases in the district court. I was on my way back to the station. I got a phone call from my chief superintendent, and he informed me, "You're now the new detective inspector in the division. Would I make my way to Dundalk station?" It's a border town, and any border town brings its own problems. And I'd never set foot in Dundalk Garda Station, but it was called Fort Apache, and it wasn't called Fort Apache for nothing. Outside of Dublin, it was one of the most busiest stations in the country. Louth Division, for being such a small county, had one of the highest crime rates at one stage. Everything that was on the menu for a policeman to deal with was found here in Dundalk.
Pat Mary's first case as a detective inspector in An Garda Síochána was already waiting for him.
A young chap who had been assaulted the night before had passed away in a hospital. I was asked to take up the investigation. Your first day as a detective inspector, you don't even get time to draw your breath, and you have a murder on your desk. I had a degree of experience, but nothing prepares you for, here it is, here's your first case, there you are, get on with it. The chap was named Niall Dorr, and he had been involved in a row the night before, around 9 o'clock.
Garda forensic experts beginning their work examining the scene this morning where the man was viciously assaulted. The victim sustained serious injuries, including some to his head. He was rushed to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda. His condition there remains critical.
The Gardaí were flagged down by a motorist to say there was a row in progress. They made their way to the scene and they found Niall. He was half lying under a parked car. He was naked from the waist up. And an ambulance was on scene very, very quick. When they got to the hospital, he had deteriorated, and that word came back to the Gardaí that this man is not well, and the Gardaí at that stage preserved the scene.
My name is Dave Dorr. I'm Niall Dorr's dad. Niall was lucky enough, in his words, to be born here in Dundalk in November 91, which would have made him 18 when he died in 2010. The one thing about Niall, and the refreshing thing about him, he was always in great form, you know, and that's the kind of thing you miss. If I was 17 or 18, around the time Niall was that age, I'd have loved to have been his friend. That was the kind of guy I'd have been friends with myself, which I think says a lot for the chap, you know. I think when his dad can turn around and say, "I'd like to have been your mate," I think it says a lot about him.
What are you laughing at now?
The Dorr family was made up of Niall, his older brother Shane, and parents Veronica and Dave.
Today is the 8th of November, and it's Niall's birthday party. And what age are you? No.
The four of us were very, very tight. We had great holidays in Disney World.
Now, if they saw me now, I could be dead.
We went skiing. We had never skied before, none of us. And we're in a group of complete learners. We got to this particular part. To me, it looked crazy stuff. And I'm saying, well, I'm definitely taking the walk. I'm not going over that. And next thing we heard this thing to our right-hand side. And here was Niall, on his own. The man hadn't even given the instruction. He's on his skis and he's gone. And he goes over the edge of it. And he goes down, and he comes up, and I'm thinking, he jumps up on the two skis, and everyone is clapping him, and he turns around, and he's two hands in the air. Now, if you want to ask me about one abiding memory I have of Niall Dorr,
A step up from D sergeant to the I is immense. The responsibility you have is a lot more, and you feel it. And I was very conscious about conducting the investigation properly. You, as a senior investigating officer, manage and control the investigation. You make the decisions in respect to the investigation. I was nervous. I won't say anything else. I was nervous. We're here on Castle Road, which is about, I suppose, 10-minute walk from the centre of Dundalk, from the square. It's a sought-after area. It's not an area where it's known for any major trouble.
Niall Dorr was found by police on Castle Road. He was lying unconscious against a parked car.
I came to see if the scene was being preserved properly. What I did then was just stand back, take a deep breath, look around my surroundings, see what's at hand in respect of the scene, and just sense what has happened here. There was a number of cars parked on the road, and I was aware that some of the people involved had ran down the road in the course of this route. Maybe the culprits put their hands on car bonnets when they were running, and they have to be looked at. Investigations can be very, very challenging, very complex, and you only ever get one chance of seizing evidence or seizing material in respect of an investigation. So you don't make a mess of it by leaving stuff behind. I had something to prove. I had to prove that I was capable, competent, and able to run a murder investigation that would result in the suspect in this crime being brought before the courts.
On the evening he was attacked, Niall was out for drinks with friends.
I met Niall one bonfire night, and we met through mutual friends and bonded that day. From then, we were pretty inseparable. My name's Tiernan O'Donnell. I'm a family friend of the Dorr family. I had been at home and I'd received a call from a mutual friend to say that the guys that Niall was with had been in an altercation, that Niall was caught up in it, and that Niall had been taken away in an ambulance. As soon as I heard, I thought, this can't be right. It's not in Niall's nature to be in a fight. He's the peacekeeper and everything. He's not the type of person that somebody would want to get into a row. Then came to find that this was true, so I thought I should reach straight out to his parents, and I called Dave. I let him know that what had happened, that he'd been taken away in an ambulance.
Got into the hospital about 11:30. And a doctor comes out to me. And I says to the doctor, I says, is he all right? And the doctor looks at me, he's fine. We just need to do a couple of tests on him, but for all the world, he's perfect. He's grand, he's okay. And I don't know, half an hour, 20 minutes, or some time later anyway, two Dundalk Gardaí walked in. And I says, lads, I says, what is ye here? We heard it was an assault. I said, it's not that bad, is it? I said, the doc says he's all right. The door opens. Doctor walks in, and the nurse comes in. And as soon as she sat down, I knew it was all over. So the doc comes over and sits beside me here, and I says to him, listen, I says, answer me this question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being good, 10 being bad, where's Niall? He's 9. He's 9. And our world collapsed right there and then. That was it. Bang.
Later then, that day, David called me. He'd said that with the condition deteriorating, that it might be best to try and get up to the hospital, try and say my last goodbyes. So I'd agreed. I said, yeah, we'll go up to the hospital. I'll see how things have progressed, still thinking positively about it. Shortly afterwards, then David called me and he said that that his condition had deteriorated more and that we wouldn't have time to actually get up to say goodbye. Sorry.
One of the main responsibilities of a senior investigating officer is to attend the post-mortem. The state pathologist, and in this particular case Mary Cassidy, will be able to tell you and show you how someone died. Niall Dorr, over his left ear, he had a 70mm crack in his skull. He also had the chevron markings of a boot and the full shape of a boot across his top of his head and across his face. Mary Cassidy had to examine his brain, and it was commented that it was one of the worst brain injuries that she had seen from this type of an assault. It just brought home to me the degree of savagery that was inflicted on this poor young man who had his life in front of him.
Pat now began his search for evidence of who was responsible.
One of the things you look for is their CCTV that will catch the incident, so it'll all make it very easy for you to see who the culprit is.
But straight away, there was a problem.
There was not a screed of CCTV on Castle Street, so I had to rely on witnesses. We had a couple who were out walking a dog. We had someone who passed in a car. We had a gentleman looking out his bedroom window and shouting at them to stop and get away.
In the first breakthrough of the investigation, those witnesses all agreed on one important fact.
They said that there was only one person involved in the assault on Niall Dorr. We have a witness who saw Niall being hit with a punch by this man and fall to the ground. He then encountered a relentless, unforgiving assault where this person stood on his head, kicked him in the head, and then dragged him by the T-shirt over to the footpath, where he continued to lift his head up and smash it off the ground. He then got his head and smashed it into the wheel nuts of a car, and then continued to jump on him and kick him. It was an absolute and honest-to-God, utter savage assault. It's the only way to describe it, is savage. It was at that stage that one of the witnesses was shouting out the window to get away, to stop. And that's when the assault on Niall Dorr stopped. We were able to establish that Niall and his two friends were confronted by approximately 7 people, 5 males and 2 females.
Niall's friends were chased from the scene before the attack and did not witness who was responsible. So, Pat arrested the entire gang of 7. But all kept silent on the identity of Niall's killer.
There were people who didn't cooperate that could have cooperated. There was a big choke on investigations when you looked for information, when you looked for, help. The scale of the challenge was huge because we had to establish which of them inflicted the wounds on Niall Dorr. Were these people going to cooperate? More than likely they weren't. Was it one person? Was it 2 people? Was it all 5 males? I didn't know.
This wall of silence threatened to obstruct the entire investigation, but it left Pat more committed than ever to finding answers.
I was determined to get to the end of it, to find out who did this and why they did it, and that they would be brought to justice.
Flowers left by family and friends in memory of Niall Dorr lie close to where he was attacked. Gardaí are still conducting detailed searches of the Castle Road area in their hunt for evidence. They've also been conducting door-to-door inquiries in the area, as well as talking to witnesses.
But key witnesses were refusing to reveal information. It left newly promoted Detective Inspector Pat Murray with few leads.
All investigations, when they start off, there are a challenge. There is no doubt, and the senior investigating officer feels that. Meeting David Dorr and Veronica Dorr for the first time in the superintendent's office in Dundalk, I remember looking at David Dorr and he was looking at me. I know he was taking stock of me as probably thinking, is this guy up to the job?
As the distressing detail of the attack on Niall Dorr became known, locals were stunned.
The people of Dundalk were just absolutely horrified and shocked at what had happened to this young man. My name is Michelle O'Keefe and I'm the editor of the Dundalk Democrat, one of the leading local papers in the area. Beyond the shock and horror, there was fear, because something like this doesn't happen to your son or your daughter. And I suppose parents were fearful for their young people as they went out and didn't want them to go out after Niall's death.
It felt like you were in a movie at times, a horror movie. You'd got detectives calling me up, wanting interviews.
I'm sorry for the child's mother and father and family. It's heartbreaking.
Have a rush of feelings, anger, sadness, revenge, all these feelings that you never think that you're going to have over a situation like this. But it's very hard to describe.
Tiernan and the rest of Niall's friends made their final goodbye at his wake and a funeral.
Niall's life was his soul, his happiness, his smile. People say that they look like they're sleeping. Niall wasn't sleeping. It didn't look anything like him.
Pat now believed he was looking for one main culprit in the gang of 7. He questioned each of them, but none would name the attacker.
I had to identify who was this person. It certainly wasn't the girls, so it was one of the 5 males. And which one was it?
Statements from eyewitnesses on Castle Road offered a clue.
They all said the man who done all the kicking and stamping on this young chap's head was the only one of them that was wearing a shirt.
Pat turned again to the limited information available in the statements from each of the gang members.
Now, we did establish that they were due in court that morning and the case was adjourned and put back, and as a result of that, they were celebrating and they went drinking at 11 o'clock in the morning.
CCTV clearly showed each of the gang drinking in pubs around Dundalk that day. One man stood out.
One particular person was wearing a shirt, and he was the only one of the 5 wearing a shirt. This man's name is Douglas Ward.
It was now immediately clear to Pat why the other members of the gang kept silent.
We were all aware who Douglas Ward was. He was known to the Gardaí. Dundalk, it's a robust town. It has plenty of good people, but it does have an element that causes trouble. Douglas Ward would have been public order offences, maybe drug offences, that type of thing. He would have been known as a hard man. People would have feared Douglas Ward. So he was, at that stage, a suspect. Douglas Ward was initially arrested on suspicion of assault on Niall Dorr. I knew what I was dealing with Douglas Ward. People like Douglas Ward, they're in every town in Ireland, and people don't want to challenge them. And then they get superior in their nature, because if you don't do what I say, I'll knock the head of you. That type of mentality. And that's just the way it is. And people are afraid of them. End of story.
Pat asked Ward to surrender the clothes he was wearing on the night of Niall's attack.
The items of interest we have here are a set of clothes that Douglas Ward produced to us.
Pat was hoping the clothes would link Ward to the crime. But this outfit bore no resemblance to the one Ward could be seen wearing on CCTV.
Douglas Ward handed us these clothes with the view of trying to put us off the track. And it's as simple as that. It was him trying to cover himself. And that's where criminals carry on. They don't always cooperate with the guards. And when they do, like this, they have an ulterior motive. Well, I've given them clothes. They're not going to find anything on that.
Pat returned again to CCTV and found footage of Douglas Ward leaving a bar wearing a shirt, but also carrying a grey hoodie.
An item like this became evidential because we knew the person that assaulted Niall Dorr was wearing a grey hoodie. So we had to search for that grey hoodie. And we did at Douglas Ward's house. It was circumstantial, of course, and not a major piece of evidence, but it was a building block that could be put in the mix at the end of the day. They always believe that you won't do it, that you can't get enough. But they're dealing with the wrong person with me anyway, because I will go and get it. I will find it. I will get them before the court.
My name's Christopher Smith. I actually went to primary school and secondary school with Niall. It was a very big group. There might have been about 10, 15 of us. We were always together every single day. Once he was with his mates, he was just happy. Like every single day, like you'd always get a text from him or a message from him. So.
His main talent was kickboxing, so he was fantastic at that, national and international level.
How do you feel? Him, how do you feel?
Feel very good.
I do.
Yeah, it feels good. Feels good. Boy feels good.
How do you feel?
Oh, I'm brilliant.
You're brilliant. How about you? Well, you're a kickboxer, you're always brilliant.
The year before he died, he'd won a silver medal at the World Championships, due to go to another tournament the month after he died. He spent most of his time kind of training to it, discipline from it, which showed in his personality.
Niall was not the type of guy who would plan too far into the future now. Niall's idea of living was today is today, tomorrow we'll see what happens. Niall was as close to adamant as you can get. I'll go to school, I'll do the school, I'll get my exams, but I'm not doing third level.
Started off down here, because they marked this, I think, in 1.5 miles. And that's what the fitness test for the army was. You had to do 1.5 miles in 11 minutes.
Think you do it now?
I think I'd be here till tomorrow. We both decided that we wanted to go to the army. There was enlisting upcoming, so we both put our minds to it, both got together, started training for the army.
Niall and Tiernan both passed the fitness test. Everything now depended on a personal interview.
Niall's interview for the army was scheduled for 8 a.m. on Wednesday, the 13th of October.
I'd met up with him shortly afterwards. He let me know kind of how he got on in the interview, how things had progressed, celebrated.
He thought, yeah, I hit it all on the money. I don't think I made a mistake.
I had my interview shortly afterwards, a couple of days later, I think. So I decided not to stay out with him that evening. I wanted to go home and do a bit more study, pick up on some of the questions that he found out of that day, and then got the call a few hours later that he'd been in an altercation, and that he'd be taken away in an ambulance.
Niall's friends told police how the altercation was sparked by a row from a few nights earlier.
There had been an incident at the fairground a few nights previous involving friends of Douglas Ward and Niall Dorr. Neither of them had actually been at the fairground or involved in the incident, but as Douglas Ward and his group that he was with came down Castle Road, they saw Niall and his two friends who were returning home. There was words said, and it was Niall that jumped in to try and keep the peace and diffuse the situation. But unfortunately, before he even knew what was happening, Douglas Ward had punched him to the ground.
Anyone that knew Niall knew he was just quiet, just wanted to keep to himself, just be with his friends. And like, I've never seen him in a fight, and I know him like almost my whole life. So it was like a big shock, I think, just for everybody. Like, you don't know how to feel. Like, we were in his house and we all got a wee jersey, signed it and stuff like that for the parents, but you just feel hopeless and useless because what can you do? Like, your friends, they're just there and like, you can't do anything to help them. So
Pat had statements from passers-by and CCTV evidence that appeared to connect Douglas Ward to the crime. But this evidence was only circumstantial.
There was no doubt in my mind, as I said, that Douglas Ward was the perpetrator of the assault on Niall Dorr. How can I prove it? Douglas Ward is saying, I wasn't there. I don't know what you're on about. So I had to establish that he was there and that he did commit the assault. We're here on Castle Street in Dundalk, and Chapter House are these apartments here. And it was here that Douglas Ward said he called to go to a party. The occupant of the apartment said there's going to be no party, and he asked Douglas Ward to take himself off.
Police interviewed the householder.
He made a statement saying they had left his apartment block, walked out the gates and turned left. All of them did, including Douglas Ward.
There were no CCTV cameras on Castle Road, but Pat did discover some in areas nearby.
Douglas Ward said he came out of the apartment and turned right up this street here. And we, as part of the investigation, had gathered all the CCTV in the adjoining roads. And if Douglas Ward had turned right, we would have caught him on CCTV. We didn't catch him on CCTV. It told us that Douglas Ward was lying. Douglas Ward turned left and walked down to Castle Road, and it was there that he encountered and ran into Niall Dorr.
Yet, even with eyewitness statements, it was not proof Douglas Ward was definitely present at the attack. Pat needed another way.
None of the witnesses could tell us how those people left the scene, but we did establish that one of the girls had a car and that they got into the car and left.
The witness drove Ward to a local hotel. His nose was bleeding and he used baby wipe tissues to clean it, then threw them out the car window.
We had the Crown Plaza Hotel searched and we found bloodied tissues. The tissues were intact. The weather hadn't in any way affected them. And the forensic lab were quite happy they would be able to extract DNA from the blood tissues, which they did, and they matched it with Douglas Ward's DNA. Finding these bloodied wipes was another building block in building our case.
Pat still needed a way to identify Ward as the attacker. He turned to witnesses among passers-by.
We had one witness who said that he could identify the person who committed the assault on Niall Dorr.
Pat now planned an identity parade, but one carried out covertly on the streets of Dundalk.
There used to be a post office here, but it's now gone. And we knew Douglas Ward was collecting his unemployment benefit there on a certain day. And across the road, we had a camera set up above in the Windsor public house. We had our witness in a car here. He was instructed to put his hand up if he saw the person that assaulted Niall Dorr. Douglas Ward arrived, went into the post office. And left. And our witness failed to pick him out.
All Pat could do was try again.
We held a second informal identification parade. Douglas Ward did appear, and he was in the company of his brother, and they looked quite similar. So when the two of them walked past the witness, he was confused, and he told us, I couldn't pick anyone out, and that was it. Two informal identification parades had not resulted in any evidential value, so you have to leave it at that. But certainly it would have been a major boost, evidentially, to have Douglas Ward identified at that stage. But you can't win them all, and that's just it.
Frustrated by the silence from members of Ward's gang and the failure of his ID parades, Pat had to find another approach.
People think assaults or one person assaulted the other, it's easy to get them. This was anything but simple. And I knew that forensics is going to be key in solving this crime and bringing it together.
My name is Stephen Clifford. I'm a forensic scientist at Forensic Science Ireland. My main area of expertise is DNA profiling. There had been a kind of a melee where there was many people involved, so these kind of cases can be difficult to detangle. So usually the first pass is to see what kind of DNA profiles we can get from certain items, which might help address some of the questions.
So in this case, one of the exhibits that came into the lab was a cigarette. Cigarettes, and cigarette butts in particular, because they come into contact with, they're usually in somebody's mouth, the person's mouth, and a person's mouth is full of saliva. Saliva is a really good source of DNA. The cigarette looked unsmoked. Without knowing, there was a small possibility that it was in somebody's mouth, they just didn't smoke it. So we still targeted the butt, and we took some of the paper from the filter of the cigarette off, and then we subjected that to the normal DNA profiling procedures. The filter paper from the butt of the cigarette was analysed. We found that there was a DNA profile that originated from 2 people. And when that DNA profile was compared to persons of interest in the case, there was a match from one of the 2 people in the cigarette butt to the profile of Douglas Ward, plus a second unknown person.
Pat hoped for forensic evidence to place Douglas Ward at the scene of the crime, but once again, it was inconclusive.
The DNA on the cigarette was unquestionably Douglas Ward's, but the object itself was movable, and there was an unknown DNA on it as well. So Douglas Ward could have given that cigarette to someone else the day before who dropped it in the course of a row. We don't know. So it was a movable object. It wasn't of any evidential value to me, and I couldn't use it as reasonable evidence.
Despite everything, Pat still could not build a solid case. It was increasingly possible Douglas Ward could escape justice.
Do you run a trial and run the risk of Douglas Ward being found not guilty, that there's a reasonable doubt someone else committed the crime?
Niall's life and the way he was killed comes to this.
Pat Marry was certain Dundalk hard man Douglas Ward killed 18-year-old Niall Dorr. But Ward's gang members refused to identify him, forcing Pat to search instead for forensic evidence. Niall's t-shirt was found near his body. Now Pat hoped it might carry the killer's DNA.
This is the t-shirt that was picked up by the ambulance crew that attended to Niall and brought it to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in the ambulance.
We had a witness statement where the person said that they saw Niall Dorr being dragged by his shoulders. So in this case, I concentrated on the upper back and shoulders of his t-shirt. And we looked for any signs of damage, would be the first visual thing. Secondly, then we look for any sign of staining. So the staining will help us to determine whether there are any body fluids present. So we're always looking for something that we can DNA profile. There was a mixed DNA profile present, and the profile matched Niall Dorr himself, which you might expect, but it also contained elements of Douglas Ward's DNA.
After 3 long months, it seemed like a step forward at last.
I remember informing my team of the DNA development. They were all very excited, saying, yes, we have it solved, we have it solved.
But Pat was not convinced.
He may say then, oh, well, right, I'm going to admit I was there all along, but I didn't touch that fella, but I was spitting at him to get away from me. And the DNA on the t-shirt was his spittle. I went to the forensic lab again and I spoke to them and explained to them my predicament. So they said they could do tests, and it was the first time they did this, that they could do a test to show that it wasn't saliva.
The forensic team set to work. Meanwhile, Pat was still worried about hitting another dead end and turned to the public for help.
When I first approached Niall's parents, David and Veronica, I made it clear that I was a local journalist who was living in the area, who had seen firsthand how the killing of their son had touched the community. They were obviously eager to get an appeal into the national press to try and find justice for what had happened to their son.
Pat himself appeared on the RTE programme Crime Call, appealing to the public for any information that might help.
What's the main thrust of your appeal here tonight?
At this stage, Anna, I have reason to believe, and do believe, there are people who witnessed the incident and they are refusing to cooperate with the investigation. And I'll be asking those people to examine their conscience, that if they're unsure, they should come and speak with us in confidence, and I'd ask them to do the right thing.
We got an anonymous letter. The anonymous letter stated that a number of people had witnessed the assault and knew the perpetrator. They were in a small red car, and they gave us the name of the people that were in this car.
Pat was certain the letter writer was in a position to name Ward, but once again, they refused to make an official statement for fear of reprisals.
You're appealing to that person's good nature to tell the truth. And she's going to be looking at, well, what's in it for me? If I tell you the truth, I'm going to have my windows broken. I'm going to have my car smashed up. I saw nothing. And that's intimidation. She was afraid to say what she saw because she knew there would be consequences. That's the culture of fear that exists in border towns like Dundalk.
The crux of this investigation is that I had eyewitnesses who would not cooperate. I had an eyewitness who thought they could pick out the culprit but couldn't. And what was I left with in the end of the day but DNA and CCTV?
Pat's case now rested on the team at Forensic Science Ireland. They were using a new test to prove the DNA on Niall's T-shirt could not have come from Douglas Ward's saliva.
What we do in this case is we're looking for any skin cells that might have been removed from the assailant's hand as he grabbed with force onto the T-shirt in this way. And how we collect those is we use a little piece of sticky tape called a mini tape. And what we do is we just touch that to the surface of the garment and it'll collect any loose epithelial or skin cells that happen to be there. So everyone deposits skin cells naturally. Some people are better shedders than others. If you sweat, you're more likely to shed more epithelial cells. If there's a lot of friction involved, you're going to shed more cells. We could rule out that it had come from blood because there was no blood staining present in the area. We could rule out that it had come from saliva because we tested for the presence of saliva and we got negative results there. So really it was a process of elimination, and I was able to say that the most likely source of the DNA was from epithelial or skin cells.
The fact that the DNA of Douglas Ward on the T-shirt was found in an area of the T-shirt, which was synonymous with someone dragging him by the T-shirt across the road. And that was extremely important to establish, which we did. And that became very evidential.
Douglas Ward had been arrested and released once already, but this new evidence gave Pat another opportunity.
When Douglas Ward was arrested for the second time, it was to put to him about the DNA evidence. He actually said, I haven't a clue how it got there. I don't know how my DNA got on the dead man's T-shirt. He couldn't even say Niall's name when he was detained. Most of his answers were no comment, so it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, his answer. But I didn't care at that stage because I knew I had him in the bag.
The investigation was at last closing in on Ward, but Pat had to have an answer to every possible defence.
I had to do a due diligence on the T-shirt itself. Could Douglas Ward's DNA be left on that T-shirt at any other incidents?
Pat had to consider every possibility, however unlikely.
Veronica, Niall's mother, had bought that T-shirt 3 weeks earlier, and she bought it in the Butter Crane shopping centre, and she said on the 12th she had washed it and ironed it and given it to Niall to put on.
Could Ward have handled the T-shirt in the shop, leaving his DNA on it, before Niall's mum had even bought it?
When Douglas Ward was arrested, he was questioned about his shopping habits, and had he ever been in Butter Crane shopping centre in Newry, and he said he had never been there in his life and he never done any shopping up there.
With this single statement, Douglas Ward at last incriminated himself in Niall's death.
I knew that Douglas Ward had held Niall Dorr's T-shirt at a time of the assault, and he could not have had his DNA on that T-shirt at any other time. I was quite confident I had a strong case against Douglas Ward for the murder of Niall Dorr.
I'd heard rumours that they arrested someone. Then he was released. Then there was another guy and another thing. And it just went on and went on and went on. Then they finally came to the conclusion, we're going to charge this guy with murder. And I says, right, now we're on the horse now. Thank you. So we took it from there.
As the trial date approached, Pat reviewed every detail of his case.
The defence team will pick up on any weaknesses, so you have to make sure your file is watertight and your investigation is watertight. And I always made sure mine was watertight, absolutely.
But an unexpected turn of events suddenly gave Douglas Ward a plausible defence.
One of the persons in Douglas Ward's company that night at the time of the assault had died tragically in a road traffic accident. It was an opening for the defence to say that Douglas Ward didn't do this, the person who is now deceased did it.
It would be enough to establish reasonable doubt in the minds of a jury. And it forced the Director of Public Prosecutions, or DPP, to consider a guilty plea from Ward, not for murder, but for the lesser charge of manslaughter.
Do you run a trial and run the risk of Douglas Ward being found not guilty, that there's a reasonable doubt someone else committed the crime? Or do you take a manslaughter charge which carries 0 to life? And I agreed with them.
The DPP was prepared to accept a guilty plea to manslaughter, but Niall's family had to be convinced.
Dave's first time in a meeting like this wanted to hear one thing and one thing only: we're going for murder. So this is what I was told, due to a number of factors, one being that there was no video evidence, that the best we could hope for, and he might get a murder and he might get off, but he's pleading to manslaughter. Niall's life, and the way he was killed, comes to this. He did this to a human being and denied being there. And then he ends up admitting to manslaughter.
In fairness to David Dorr, he left it to the experts, which was the DPP, to decide on, and the prosecuting counsel.
A conviction for manslaughter allows a judge to impose a wide range of sentences. Niall's family wanted justice, but Douglas Ward hoped for leniency.
I think myself he was under the impression he was going to get a sentence of about 5 or 6 years. You know, good behaviour and all, he'd do 2 years and he'd be out.
Ward didn't know Niall Dorr, but the court heard he ripped the teenager's shirt off him and continued to attack him, even when he was unresponsive on the ground. The senior investigating officer, Detective Inspector Patrick Marry, said Niall sustained irrevocable brain damage. Surgery was not possible.
The judge at the time, I remember, now deceased, he says, you're getting 16 years, and if I could give you more, I would. So I says, that's. Now, they weren't expecting that at all. And the guards probably weren't expecting it.
Niall was the peacemaker and didn't want harm to come to anyone. But little did he know that he was dealing with bloodthirsty thugs. To knock a person unconscious and then to repeatedly bang his head off the ground and kick his lifeless body to a pulp is just the stuff of animals.
There's a bit of relief, knowing that nobody was going to get away with it. We know that these cases can be difficult, can be hard to prove. There's a bit of comfort knowing that he was going to spend a long time behind bars.
Douglas Ward got a sentence of 16 years with 3 years suspended. When I was leaving the court, Veronica Dorr came up to me and she says, Pat, only for you, thank you. And she gave me a big hug. I knew at that stage I had done a good job. I'd done good by the family. That to me was a moment I won't forget.
But Niall's killer had one more card to play.
Douglas Ward appealed his conviction on the basis that he was drunk at the time and he had a drink problem. And being an alcoholic or having a drink problem is seen as having a disease. The appeal court knocked 3 years off his sentence on that basis.
The chaplain in Mountjoy prison wrote a letter on behalf of the guy who killed my son, to say that this guy was a model prisoner who hadn't had a drink since he went to Mountjoy.
I believe that you take a life, you should spend the rest of your life behind bars. To say there's excuses behind it, there are reasons that you do things like that. You can blame certain issues, but that was pure evil. Whether he spent 25 years, 16 years, or the rest of his life in jail, I don't think that you can justify murder. There's no justice behind it.
And this is where we would have set the vigil.
Hundreds of candles.
There's hundreds of people up here for weeks.
Talking about it's harder, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not a street. It's a street to try to avoid as much as possible. So many dark memories.
We'll never forget him. He'll always be with us, like, and even on our nights out, like, we still mention Niall, we talk about Niall, we'll have a drink for Niall, so he'll always be with us, like.
He'll never be able to have a son, a daughter, hold his child, feel that love, that connection. He'll never be able to walk down an aisle with the woman that he loves. He'll never be able to see his new nephew that he has now. All these things that he's missed out in life were stolen from him. He could have went down a dark road after it. But he owed more to Niall and his family. I promised him that I'll do the things that were robbed of him.
The last time I saw him, he was in the hospital in Drogheda, and at about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or sometime on that Thursday, they decided, look, we're going to be taking him out now and we're going to take him downstairs for his organs operation. So they're going to take him. So it's grand. I can still remember, just before he went around the corner, phew, that was hard. I can't get over my head. But what a great guy. You know, he was 18 and he decides, I'm going to have an organ donor card. It wasn't just a snap decision, give me that and I'll sign it. I still actually have his card in my wallet, his organ donor card. But he decided he wanted it. And he took his time over signing, it took a day or two, and then he gave it to his mum, hold that for me. Of course. His mother looks, yeah, grand, I'll keep it for you.
Niall was actually the reason I became an organ donor. The nights of his wake and stuff, we had organ donor cards out. Still do it at his anniversaries and stuff like that. Try and promote that as much as possible because that's something that gives me great comfort knowing that he was able to save 5 lives with the organs that he donated.
Meanwhile, Douglas Ward began his prison sentence. Then in 2015, 5 years after Niall's death, Pat received a phone call.
I was informed by one of my team, did you hear Douglas Ward died in prison? And I said, no, I didn't hear.
I got a call at work from Pat Mary. I thought me and Pat were finished. You're going to hear in the news now, he says, in about an hour. His young man, Ward, was found dead in his cell this morning.
On the 8th of May 2015, that morning, early, about 6:30 in the morning, prison officers came to his cell and found him unresponsive. He had drank prison hooch the night before in his cell, and illegal alcohol that he consumed in prison.
So the only solace I got out of that man dying was, rather than him having to emigrate, I could be assured from that day forward that I'd never have to meet him again. And that was not a bad thing, but I certainly would not have wished him dead.
So be it. I wouldn't lose any sleep over it anyway.